Imagine a world where you can overcome any challenge, defeat any opponent, and achieve any goal, all without ever raising a fist. This isn't a fantasy. It's a reality that's within your grasp, how to destroy your enemies without fighting them. This is the ultimate path to success, the pinnacle of personal power, and I'm here to show you exactly how to do it. Now, when I say destroy your enemy, I don't mean physical destruction. I'm talking about rendering their negative influence in your life obsolete. I'm talking about rising so far above their level that they cease to be a threat. This is about personal growth, strategic thinking, and mastering the art of indirect victory. Your greatest enemy isn't out there in the world. It's not your competitor, your critic, or even that person who seems determined to see you fail. No, your greatest enemy is within you. It's the voice of doubt, the fear of failure, the habit of procrastination. These are the real enemies we need to conquer first. How many times have you been held back not by external forces, but by your own limiting beliefs? How often have you talked yourself out of taking that bold step, making that crucial decision, or pursuing that dream? These internal enemies are far more dangerous than any external foe because they have insider access. They know your weaknesses, your fears, your insecurities. So our first step in destroying our enemies without fighting is to wage an internal war. We need to root out these negative thoughts and replace them with empowering beliefs. This isn't easy, but it's absolutely essential. Every morning when you wake up, I want you to look in the mirror and say, I am capable, I am worthy, I am unstoppable. Repeat this mantra until you believe it with every fiber of your being. But positive affirmations alone aren't enough. You need to back them up with action. Start small if you need to, but start. If you've been putting off that project, take the first step today. If you've been avoiding that difficult conversation, make the call now. Every small victory over your internal enemies strengthens you for the battles ahead. External enemies. These could be competitors in business, detractors in your personal life, or anyone who seems to stand in the way of your success. The key to defeating these enemies without fighting is to change the game entirely. Don't play by their rules. Create your own. Instead of trying to tear down your enemies, focus on building yourself up. While they're busy plotting against you, invest that energy in personal growth. Read books, attend seminars, learn new skills. Every minute you spend improving yourself is a minute your enemies fall further behind. Remember, success is the best revenge. When you're at the top of your game, those who once tried to hold you back become irrelevant. They'll be so far below you that their actions and words won't even register. This is how you destroy an enemy without throwing a single punch. Let me give you an example. In the business world, I once knew a young entrepreneur who was constantly being undercut by a larger, more established competitor. This competitor had more resources, more connections, and seemed determined to drive our young friend out of business. Now, he could have engaged in a price war, tried to poach employees, or launched a smear campaign. But instead, he did something remarkable. He focused entirely on providing the best possible service to his existing customers. He invested in training his team, improving his product, and building genuine relationships with his clients. He worked tirelessly to exceed expectations at every turn. And you know what happened? His customers became his greatest advocates. Word spread about the exceptional quality of his work, and soon new clients were seeking him out. Meanwhile, his competitor was so busy trying to undermine him that they neglected their own business. Their service quality dropped, their employees became disengaged, and their customers started looking elsewhere. Within 2 years, our young entrepreneur had not only survived but thrived, while his once mighty competitor was struggling to stay afloat. This is the power of indirect combat. By focusing on excellence rather than engagement, he rendered his enemy irrelevant. He didn't need to fight, he simply needed to outperform. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, but what if my enemy is actively trying to harm me? What if they're spreading lies or attempting to sabotage my efforts? This is where another powerful strategy comes into play, the art of redirection. In martial arts, there's a principle called using your opponent's energy against them. The idea is that instead of meeting force with force, you redirect your opponent's momentum to your advantage. We can apply this same principle in our daily lives. If someone is spreading rumors about you, don't engage in a war of words. Instead, let your actions speak louder. If they claim you're incompetent, respond by demonstrating your expertise. If they question your integrity, double down on your ethical behavior. Every attack they launch becomes an opportunity for you to showcase your strengths. This approach does two things. First, it undermines the credibility of your attacker. People will see the disconnect between what's being said about you and what you're actually doing. Second, it forces your enemy to constantly change tactics, keeping them off balance while you remain focused and steady. Over time, this approach can turn enemies into allies. When people see that their attacks aren't affecting you, that you respond to negativity with positivity and excellence, it can trigger a shift in their perspective. Some may begrudgingly come to respect you. Others might even seek to learn from you. I once heard a story about a politician who was constantly being attacked by a particular journalist. This journalist seemed to have a personal vendetta, always twisting the politician's words and painting them in the worst possible light. Now, the politician could have fought back, could have tried to discredit the journalist or use their influence to have them reassigned. Instead, they did something unexpected. They invited the journalist to shadow them for a week to see firsthand how they worked and what they stood for. It was a risk, but it paid off. The journalist, exposed to the reality rather than the rumors, began to see things differently. Their articles became more balanced, more fair. And in time, this former enemy became one of the politician's strongest supporters. This is the ultimate victory, not just neutralizing an enemy, but converting them to your cause. It's not easy and it won't always work, but when it does, it's far more powerful than any confrontation could ever be. An important aspect of destroying your enemies without fighting. Emotional control. Your enemies want to see you angry. They want to see you frustrated, flustered, and off balance. Why? Because when you're emotional, you're easier to manipulate. You make mistakes. You play into their hands. The ability to maintain your composure in the face of provocation is a superpower. It's like wearing an invisible armor that your enemies can't penetrate. When you respond to anger with calm, to pettiness with dignity, to manipulation with integrity, you're not just winning the battle. You're demonstrating that there's no battle to be fought. This level of emotional control takes practice. It's not about suppressing your emotions, but about choosing how to express them. When you feel that surge of anger or frustration, pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, how would my best self respond to this situation? Then act from that place of wisdom rather than reaction. Over time, this practice becomes a habit. You will find yourself automatically responding to provocations with poise and grace. And let me tell you, nothing frustrates an enemy more than realizing their attacks have no effect on you. It's like throwing punches at a ghost. Eventually, they'll tire themselves out while you remain untouched. But emotional control isn't just about defense. It's also a powerful offensive tool. When you're calm and collected, you can think more clearly. You can see opportunities that others miss. You can make better decisions, form stronger alliances, and navigate complex situations with ease. Imagine you're in a negotiation with someone who's known for their aggressive tactics. They're loud, they're pushy, they're trying to intimidate you. The old you might have gotten flustered, might have backed down or lashed out. But the new you, emotionally controlled you, stays calm. You listen carefully, you respond thoughtfully, and you stand your ground without aggression. What happens next is almost magical. Your calm demeanor starts to influence the entire room. Others begin to see the contrast between your composure and your opponent's aggression. They start to view you as the more reasonable party, the one they'd rather deal with. Without throwing a single verbal punch, you've shifted the dynamics in your favor. This brings us to another crucial strategy for destroying your enemies without fighting. Building a strong network. Your network is your net worth, not just in terms of financial opportunities, but in terms of support, influence, and protection. When you have a robust network of allies, your enemies have to think twice before moving against you. It's not just about having people who will defend you, although that's certainly valuable. It's about creating a web of positive relationships that make any attack on you counterproductive for the attacker. If you're known as someone who adds value to others, who consistently supports and uplifts those around you, an attack on you becomes an attack on the entire network. Your allies will rush to your defense, not because you ask them to, but because they genuinely believe in you. Building this network takes time and effort. It's not about collecting business cards or LinkedIn connections. It's about genuinely investing in relationships. Listen to people, help them achieve their goals. Celebrate their successes. Be there for them in tough times. When you consistently show up for others, they'll show up for you. You don't build this network with the explicit goal of defending against enemies. You do it because it's the right thing to do, because adding value to others adds value to your own life. The protection it offers is a natural consequence, not the primary aim. This approach to networking has another powerful effect. It leaves your enemies isolated. While you're building bridges, they're burning them. While you're creating opportunities for others, they're focused on tearing people down. Over time, they'll find themselves with fewer and fewer allies, their influence diminishing as yours grows. Some people think that destroying your enemies without fighting means being passive, means just turning the other cheek and hoping for the best. Nothing could be further from the truth. This approach requires active engagement, strategic thinking, and consistent effort. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about transcending it. It's like playing chess when your opponent is playing checkers. They're focused on the immediate capture, on the frontal assault. You're thinking several moves ahead, setting up complex strategies and maneuvering for long-term advantage. It's not that you can't engage in direct confrontation. It's that you choose not to because you have better options. This strategic mindset is crucial. Every action you take, every decision you make should be part of a larger plan. When your enemy makes a move, don't just react, pause. Consider, how can you turn this to your advantage? How does this fit into your broader strategy often? What seems like a setback can be transformed into an opportunity if you have the vision to see it. Let me give you another example. I once knew a small business owner who was being pressured by a larger company to sell his business. This larger company used every tactic they could. They undercut prices, they tried to poach employees, they even spread rumors to suppliers. Our small business owner could have gotten into a tit-for-tat battle, could have tried to fight fire with fire. Instead, he got strategic. He realized that the larger companies' aggressive tactics were alienating a lot of people in the industry. So he positioned his company as the ethical alternative. He doubled down on customer service, on employee satisfaction, on community involvement. He turned every attack from the larger company into a chance to demonstrate his business's values. The result? Not only did he keep his business, but he thrived. Customers who were tired of the larger company's tactics flocked to him. Talented employees, attracted by the positive culture, sought him out. And eventually, the larger company's reputation took such a hit that they had to change their entire approach to the market. This is the power of strategic thinking. By taking the long view, by refusing to be drawn into petty battles, our small business owner didn't just survive an attack. He used it as a launching pad for unprecedented growth. This approach requires patience. In our instant gratification culture, we often want immediate results. We want to see our enemies vanquished overnight, but true, lasting victory takes time. It's about planting seeds today that will grow into mighty oaks tomorrow. This patience is itself a powerful weapon. Your enemies, focused on short-term gains, will often make mistakes in their haste. They'll overextend themselves, burn bridges they may later need, make promises they can't keep. Meanwhile, you're steadily building, growing, improving. You're playing the long game, and in the long game, patience almost always wins. Throughout this talk, we've been using the term enemy, but I want you to understand that this is largely a mental construct. In reality, most people aren't your enemies. They're just people with their own goals, fears, and motivations that sometimes conflict with yours. Understanding this is crucial, because when you can see your enemies as human beings rather than cartoon villains, it opens up new possibilities for resolution. It allows you to empathize, to potentially find common ground, to transform rivalry into collaboration. This doesn't mean you become naive or let your guard down, but it does mean approaching conflicts with a spirit of curiosity rather than hostility. Ask yourself, what might driving this person's actions? What are they afraid of? What do they need? Often when you can answer these questions, you can find solutions that benefit everyone. I remember a case of two tech startups that were fierce competitors. They were constantly trying to outmaneuver each other, poaching talent, racing to patent similar technologies. It was a classic business rivalry. But then something interesting happened. The founders of these companies ended up seated next to each other at an industry conference. Instead of ignoring each other or engaging in corporate small talk, they actually had a real conversation. They discovered that while their companies were competing, their ultimate visions for the industry were quite similar. They both wanted to push the boundaries of what was possible, to create technologies that could genuinely improve people's lives. This realization led to a series of discussions and eventually a partnership. Instead of wasting resources fighting each other, they combined their strengths. The result was a level of innovation neither could have achieved alone. This story illustrates a profound truth. Often, our greatest enemies can become our most valuable allies. But this can only happen when we're willing to look beyond the surface to seek understanding rather than victory. The art of selective engagement. Not every provocation deserves a response. Not every challenge needs to be met head-on. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to simply not engage. This isn't about being passive or weak, and it's about being selective with your energy and attention. It's about understanding that every time you engage with an enemy, you're giving them power. You're allowing them to set the agenda, to dictate the terms of the interaction. By choosing not to engage, you deny them this power. You keep the focus on your goals, your priorities, your path forward. This can be incredibly frustrating for someone who's trying to provoke you. They're looking for a reaction, and when they don't get one, they're left flailing. But selective engagement doesn't mean never responding. It means choosing your battles wisely. It means engaging only when doing so clearly serves your larger goals. When you do engage, do so on your terms in a way that advances your agenda rather than reacting to theirs. This strategy requires a high level of self-awareness and discipline. It's easy to get pulled into every conflict, to feel like you need to defend yourself against every slight. But the most successful people, the true masters of destroying enemies without fighting, understand that their time and energy are precious resources. They invest these resources carefully, strategically. I'm reminded of a story about a successful CEO who was known for her unflappable demeanor. A journalist once asked her how she dealt with the constant criticism and attacks that came with her high-profile position. Her response was illuminating. She said, "I imagine my time and energy as a pie. Every time I engage with a critic or respond to an attack, I'm giving them a slice of that pie. I've realized that I'd rather use those slices to build my business, to serve my customers, to develop my team. So I've become very selective about who gets a slice." This CEO understood the power of selective engagement. She knew that by choosing not to fight every battle, she was preserving her energy for the things that truly mattered, and in doing so, she was rendering her enemies irrelevant. Let's move on to another crucial aspect of destroying your enemies without fighting: the power of excellence. Simply put, the best way to silence your critics is to be so good they can't ignore you. When you consistently deliver excellence, when you continually raise the bar in your field, you create a form of protection that no amount of enemy action can penetrate. When you're at the top of your game, delivering results that speak for themselves, what can your enemies really say? Their criticism falls flat in the face of your accomplishments. Their attempts to undermine you look petty and small compared to the value you're creating. This pursuit of excellence isn't about perfection. It's about consistent improvement, about always striving to be better today than you were yesterday. It's about setting standards for yourself that are higher than any your critics could impose on you. But excellence isn't just about skill or talent. It's also about character. It's about integrity, reliability, and the way you treat others. When you combine high performance with strong character, you create a reputation that becomes your shield and your sword. I once knew a salesperson who was the target of constant backbiting and jealousy from her colleagues. They spread rumors, tried to steal her clients, even sabotaged her presentations. But instead of fighting back, she doubled down on her work. She arrived earlier, stayed later, and most importantly, she focused on truly understanding and serving her clients' needs. Over time, something interesting happened. Her excellent work and impeccable character began to speak for themselves. Clients refused to work with anyone else. New team members sought her out as a mentor. Even some of her former critics began to come around, asking for advice and support. By focusing on excellence, she didn't just neutralize her enemies, she turned many of them into allies and admirers. That's the power of being so good they can't ignore you. Another powerful tool in your arsenal, the art of reframing. This is about changing the narrative, shifting the perspective from which a situation is viewed. When you master this skill, you can turn attacks into opportunities criticism into fuel for growth. How it works. When faced with a challenge or an attack, most people accept the framing given to them. If someone calls them a failure, they try to prove they're not a failure. If someone says they can't do something, they focus on showing they can. But this reactive approach keeps you playing on your enemy's turf by their rules. Instead, reframe the situation entirely. If someone calls you a failure, don't defend against the label. Instead, talk about how every setback has taught you valuable lessons that have made you stronger. If someone says you can't do something, don't just try to prove them wrong. Instead, question whether that something is even worth doing, or if there might be a better goal to pursue. This reframing does two things. First, it puts you back in control of the narrative. You're no longer reacting. You're creating. Second, it often catches your opponents off guard. They're prepared for you to defend against their attack, not to change the conversation entirely. I remember a small tech company that was constantly being dismissed by larger competitors as just a bunch of kids playing with code. Instead of defensively trying to prove their maturity and experience, they embraced the label. They reframed their youth as a strength, positioning themselves as the fresh, innovative alternative to stodgy old tech giants. Their marketing campaigns playfully referenced their childlike curiosity and playground of ideas. The result, they attracted clients who were tired of the old way of doing things and were looking for fresh perspectives. They drew in young, hungry talent who wanted to work somewhere fun and dynamic, and they completely disarmed their critics, who found their barbs about youth and inexperience now falling flat or even backfiring. That's the power of reframing. It turns weaknesses into strengths, obstacles into opportunities. Master this skill, and you will find that many of your enemy's weapons simply cease to work. Move on to another crucial strategy, the power of alliance building. In the complex world we live in, no one succeeds entirely on their own. By forming strategic alliances, you can create a support system that makes you virtually unassailable. These alliances can take many forms. They might be formal business partnerships, informal networks of mutual support, or even just good relationships with key individuals in your field. The key is to approach these relationships with a mindset of mutual benefit. You're not looking for protectors or patrons. You're looking for partners. Areas where you are weak, where your enemies may try to attack, and look for allies who are strong in those areas. Maybe you're great at innovation but struggle with marketing. Find partners who excel at getting products in front of customers. Perhaps you have deep industry knowledge but lack capital. Seek out investors who bring not just money, but valuable connections and expertise. But building alliances isn't just about filling your weak spots. It's also about amplifying your strengths. Look for partners whose capabilities complement yours, where working together creates something greater than the sum of its parts. I once knew an entrepreneur who was developing a revolutionary new medical device. She was brilliant at the technical aspects, but struggled with navigating regulatory approvals and scaling up production. Instead of trying to learn everything herself or hiring a huge team, she formed strategic alliances. She partnered with a regulatory consultant who knew the FDA process inside out. She allied with a manufacturer who was looking to break into the medical device market and was willing to invest in scaling up production. These alliances didn't just fill gaps in her capabilities. They created a robust ecosystem around her product that made it very difficult for competitors to challenge her. By the time larger medical device companies realized the threat she posed, she had already locked up key patents, regulatory approvals, and production capabilities. That's the power of alliance building. It doesn't just make you stronger. It can change the entire competitive landscape in your favor. A strategy that may seem counterintuitive, radical transparency. In a world where many people play their cards close to the chest, being open and transparent can be a powerful way to disarm your enemies. Why it works. Many of our enemies' most potent weapons rely on secrecy and speculation. They spread rumors because the truth isn't known. They make insinuations because there's room for doubt. They attack in the shadows because they don't want to be seen. By practicing radical transparency, you take away their shadows. You leave no room for rumor or speculation. You bring everything into the light where it can be seen clearly. This doesn't mean sharing every detail of your personal life or revealing trade secrets. It means being open about your motives, clear about your actions, and honest about your mistakes. It means inviting scrutiny because you have nothing to hide. I remember a CEO who took over a company that had been plagued by scandals and public distrust. Instead of hunkering down and trying to weather the storm, he took a radical approach. He started publishing detailed accounts of the company's efforts to address past issues. He invited independent auditors to examine their practices and publish their findings, warts and all. He started a blog where he candidly discussed the challenges the company was facing and his thoughts on how to address them. At first, this openness led to a flurry of negative press as all the company's dirty laundry was aired. But over time, something remarkable happened. The constant flow of information left little room for speculation or rumor mongering. Journalists found themselves reporting on the company's transformation efforts rather than digging for scandals, and customers began to return, drawn by the company's newfound commitment to honesty and transparency. By being radically transparent, this CEO had turned the company's biggest weakness, its damaged reputation, into a strength. He had disarmed critics by being more open and honest than they ever expected. The strategy of radical transparency isn't easy. It requires courage, consistency, and a thick skin. But when done right, it can be one of the most powerful ways to destroy your enemies without fighting. It turns their weapons of secrecy and innuendo against them, leaving them to deal with the harsh light of truth. In our fast-paced world, there's immense pressure to respond quickly, to always be doing something. But sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to wait. Strategic patience isn't about being passive. It's about understanding the rhythms of your industry, the cycles of public opinion, the ebb and flow of your opponent's energy. It's about knowing when to act and, just as importantly, when to hold back. It like surfing. A good surfer doesn't try to fight the ocean or create waves. They watch, they wait, and when the right wave comes, they ride it to shore. In the same way, by practicing strategic patience, you can conserve your energy and resources, waiting for the perfect moment to make your move. This patience can be particularly effective when dealing with aggressive enemies. Often, they'll exhaust themselves with constant attacks, burning bridges and alienating potential allies in their zeal to harm you. By remaining calm and patient, you position yourself to step in when they inevitably overreach. I'm reminded of a political leader who was the target of a relentless smear campaign. Every day brought new accusations, each more outlandish than the last. Many of her advisors urged her to fight back, to counter each claim immediately, but she chose a different path. She responded to the most serious allegations with clear, factual statements, but otherwise she largely held her peace. She focused on her work, on delivering results for her constituents, and she waited. Over time, the constant barrage of accusations began to lose its impact. People started to notice that while her opponents were slinging mud, she was solving problems. The contrast became clear, and when evidence emerged that many of the allegations were fabricated, public opinion shifted dramatically in her favor. By practicing strategic patience, this leader had allowed her enemies to discredit themselves. She hadn't won by fighting. She'd won by waiting for the right moment. I want to leave you with one final crucial idea: the importance of self-renewal. Dealing with enemies, even in these non-confrontational ways we've discussed, can be draining. It requires constant vigilance, emotional control, and strategic thinking. Over time, this can take a toll. That's why it's essential to have practices that renew your spirit, recharge your energy, and reconnect you with your purpose. This might be meditation, exercise, time in nature, or engaging in a hobby you love. The specific activity doesn't matter as much as its effect. It should leave you feeling refreshed, centered, and ready to face the world again. It's like sharpening a saw. You could keep sawing with a dull blade, working harder and harder to make each cut. Or you could take a break to sharpen the saw, making all your future work easier and more effective. In the context of dealing with enemies, this self-renewal serves another crucial purpose. It helps you maintain perspective. It reminds you that there's more to life than conflicts and competitions. It helps you stay connected to your values, your goals, your reason for doing what you do. This perspective is vital because ultimately the goal isn't just to neutralize your enemies, it's to create a life and a career that's so fulfilling, so impactful that the very idea of enemies becomes irrelevant. When you're truly operating at your highest level, focused on your purpose and making your unique contribution to the world, petty rivalries and conflicts fall away. The ultimate way to destroy your enemies without fighting isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about becoming so focused, so effective, so fulfilled in your pursuits that negative influences simply can't touch you. It's about rising to a level where the very concept of enemies no longer has any meaning. I want you to imagine that version of yourself. Imagine being so secure in your capabilities, so clear in your purpose, so strong in your relationships that no attack can shake you. Imagine being so focused on creating value, on making a positive impact, that you don't have time or energy to worry about who's trying to undermine you. That version of you is within reach. By applying the strategies we've discussed, mastering your inner world, focusing on excellence, building alliances, practicing radical transparency, exercising strategic patience, and committing to self-renewal, you can get there. Remember, true victory isn't about defeating others. It's about becoming the best possible version of yourself. When you achieve that, you won't have destroyed your enemies. You will have transcended the very idea of having enemies at all. Thank you for your time and attention. Now go out there and change the world, not by fighting, but by rising above, by creating, by becoming the person you're truly meant to be.